are on a fast track to climate disaster. Major cities underwater, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages, the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals. And this is not fiction or exaggeration. Climate scientists warn major cities underwater, unprecedented heat waves, terrifying storms, widespread water shortages, the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals. And this is not fiction or exaggeration. Climate scientists warn that we are already perilously close to tipping points that could lead to cascading and irreversible climate impacts. This is a climate emergency.
Climate disasters and hazards, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, are a wake-up call that business as usual is over. The world can no longer turn a blind eye to risk or the cascading impacts of disasters on the world's most vulnerable countries and people. Disaster risk reduction is about ensuring development succeeds, people are protected, and that no one is left behind. This is the moment and this is the place where the world gathers to take a stand. Now is the time to move from risk to resilience. Welcome to the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction.
appropriate gesture would be a dance rooted in gratitude for your presence. Applause please for the dancers. The welcome dance of Asmara Dana. A dance of joy and love for life itself. Asmara Dana literally translates to mean fire of passion. The dance movement expresses joy and vibrant collaboration to showcase the gratitude for life and for such precious time we have at hand. Meeting challenges with grit, resilience is therefore rooted in enjoying transformation. From risk to resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, allow us to greet His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, Excellency, United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Excellency President of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, guests, delegates who would like to recognize, streaming from all over the globe, amongst whom is the 5th President of the Republic of Indonesia, Her Excellency Mrs. Megawati Soekarno-Putri. A very warm welcome to the opening ceremony of the 7th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction here in Nusa Dua, Bali, Indonesia. Today, Wednesday, the 25th of May, 2022. From a feast for our eyes in the welcome dance, let us now have a feast for our ears in a rhythmic flow of words. Please welcome to the stage a poet and UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, Ms. Emitita Mahmud.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Your Excellency, President of Indonesia, and our other distinguished guests, DSG Amina Mohammed, PGA Abdullah Shahid, and SRSG Maya Mizatori. I'm really honored to be here, and I come to you as someone who is from Darfur, Sudan, and grew up in the US. So I have the added perspective of being from one of the countries that is most culpable of a lot of the damage that we're here to address, and also originating from one of the countries that has the outsized impacts. What I want you to keep in mind going forward, everyone in this room, and the rest of the world, if you are listening, that a lot of times young people are left as the buffer between us and complete disaster. And so when you move forward, I would like you to innovate just as creatively with how you collaborate and engage with youth and bring us into the conversation as you do with everything else. what I want everyone to remember is that vulnerable populations often deal with the consequences of change in a way that the rest of us don't have to. I come to you after finding out that 100 million people in the world are displaced now, and 80% of people who are displaced are at the front lines of the climate crisis. So when we move forward, I hope we can move from meaningful participation to meaningful collaboration and bring people into the conversation on their own terms and not by pre-setting the parameters for them. So I'm really excited about this, and I hope this poem helps you remember the real human toll that all of this has. So this poem is called Di Baladna, or Our Land. So in short, please include everyone and do your best to help us solve the crises so the youth are not left to clean up. Di Baladna. If you are reading this, I forgive you. You have grown far from the heart of me, my child, have lost the familiar love we held for one another in your first years of life. When you were young, you marveled at the plants and critters that ran across my bosom. You worshiped the water, swam up and down my rivers. You drank from my rain. You sunk your fingers into the mud of me and tickled loose little droplets, seedlings, and worms. How you built a refuge for every wayward wanderer, lining the kitchen shelves in jars of fireflies and lightning bugs. You drank the breeze from my trees, the honey sapped gum with joy and ease. How you came to me, resting your head at my tender hearth, your weary body in my pockets. You loved me. You nurtured me before you knew what it was to nurture, tended me before you knew what it was to tend. Tiller, sower, green-thumbed little one, you knew me. Lately, you hurt me. You break and cut and tear into me, and I forgive you. For I am a part of you, like your brothers and sisters before you, so I forgive you. I forgive you again for the waste and greed and gluttony, again for the tilling you do with no intention to sow, again for the reaping you do with no intention to sow. When you were young, you asked me why they do this. Once brothers and sisters staining the earth with the blood of your people, shaking apart the branches of your family tree. You losing ground and hope all in one fell swoop, you came to me. Resting beneath the shade of date palms and magnolias, you begged me to make sense of it all. All I could offer you then was a promise that wherever you would go, you would find me. But lately, there isn't much left for me to promise. They have dug pits into my sides, have stolen the rubies, gold, and diamonds, my place in my thighs. I do all I can to heal, but my weary body won't clear away the hurt so easily. My waters rush but do not soothe. The air in my lungs suffocates the little ones. I cough and spew and gush and bruise, and it will not heal. When a child of mine dies by my hands, here in the long-forgotten valley of your youth, visitors come not of their own accord, but by necessity. Abdul Ghani and his Zahara sink their fingers into the mud of me, saplings cling, and I am whole again. Hatim builds monuments to my skies, captures the sun, channels the lightning, and I am whole again. Luca and Layatu fill their home with fruit born of me. The children eat and grow and are healthy, and I am whole again. Usman says, it isn't mine alone to build, he says. It isn't mine alone to mend. I need you to build and build again, to make new, to bring forth life from relentless earth, making an oasis of charred terrain, to make a refuge of nothing but scar tissue and lightning strikes. Let me be more to you than just a final resting place. Let me do more for you than call you home, child of mine. If you are reading this, I need you, your mother. If this land could speak, would she thank us, praise us? Would she ridicule us or beg us? Would her voice be weary, gentle, disdainful? Would it shake with sorrow, with rage? I used to wonder about these things all of the time. At 11 years old, I watched my neighbor's house crumble before my eyes. The floodwaters came and washed away the earth and clay people used to build their homes. Our country was already locked in turmoil, and now the earth began to purge us too. If you could stop the next tornado from hitting your home, the next hurricane from wiping out your city, the next drought from starving your people, the next lightning strike from ending your life, wouldn't you? The locusts in the Horn of Africa, the floods in South Sudan, the ice in Chicago, the fires in California, Australia, the threat of rain that won't stop or rest that won't come. We are at the precipice of possible change, a turning point that can and will define us, fire or ice. How will the world end? I don't know, and I don't want to find out. Not in our generation, and not in the next. Thank you, everyone.
Emitital Mahmoud. Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we would now kindly invite Ms. Mami Mizutori, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, as moderator to lead the next agenda. Ms. Mizutori, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency, Joko Widodo, President of the Republic of Indonesia. Your Excellency, Ms. Amina Mohamed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Your Excellency, Mr. Menghadiri Effendi, Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Your Excellency, Ms. Retno Marsudi, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia. Your Excellency, Mr. Suharyanto, Head of the National Disaster Management Agency of the Republic of Indonesia. Ms. Valerie Juliand, UN Resident Coordinator for Indonesia. Excellencies, distinguished representatives of intergovernmental organizations, United Nations agencies, international organizations, and stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, I call to order this meeting. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the opening of the 7th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction under the theme of From Risk to Resilience towards Sustainable Development for All in a COVID-19 Transformed World. We are convening this global platform at a very challenging time, to say the least. Disasters have always been a plight, but we are now living in the aftermath of a disaster, the scale of which the world has not seen in many decades. It has upended conventional understandings of risk and what it means to manage disaster risks. All the while, drivers of risk that existed before the pandemic have only grown stronger. Climate change, environmental degradation, and unplanned urban growth continue unabated. At the same time, human vulnerability is at all-time high due to increasing poverty, inequality, and the erosion of human rights. This threatens the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals and all global agreements for a resilient future. But there is hope and opportunity, and our gathering here today in Indonesia is proof that humanity has not given up. We must seize this moment to transform how we view the managed risks. Together, through solidarity and partnerships, we can tackle the common risks that threaten us. Let us leave no one behind and emerge stronger and more resilient. The organization of this global platform embodies the COVID-19 transformed new normal taking place during a pandemic. It is made safe, thanks to the protective measures implemented by our host country and supported by all of you. I thank the government of Indonesia for graciously, generously hosting us, and thank you all for being here. And it is now my honor to invite Ms. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, to give her remarks. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, Vice President, Republic of Zambia, my sister, Her Excellency Mutale Nahlumango, President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, our spoken word genius, wonderful to hear you, Amitahal, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the people of Bali, Swahasti, Astru, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to convey the appreciation of the United Nations to the President of Indonesia and the government and people for hosting the 2022 Global Platform for Risk Reduction. I would further like to congratulate and appreciate Indonesia for the measures that have been taken to address the COVID-19 response that has allowed us to meet today in person at this conference, with over 7,000 people registered and 79% of them here in person. And I believe that that requires some congratulations. Congratulations, Mr. President. Vaccinating a population of 270 million is a huge feat, and we applaud the leadership of Indonesia for its vaccine program for keeping everyone safe and reacting and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Indonesia is a critical partner that has much to teach the world about disaster risk reduction. Your willingness to host this important gathering is a testament to the leading role that you play in sustaining development and climate action. Thus, I am really honored and pleased to see increasing collaboration between UN agencies to address the growing disaster and climate risks in fragile contexts and to strengthen the humanitarian development peace nexus. This is where the vulnerable have the most risk of being left behind. This is the first global platform since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. It takes place as global crises are multiplying, with the devastating effects particularly on the poorest and the most vulnerable. People around the world are experiencing the impact of the climate emergency on a daily basis. The war in Ukraine is contributing to sky-high food, rocketing prices and energy prices with serious implications for the global financial system. At the same time, we face the constant threat of other disasters too. If things continue as they are, we will experience a 1.5 medium to large-scale disasters every single day by 2030. As it stands, disasters are already wreaking havoc in our efforts towards attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Our decisions and actions can inadvertently influence our risk and exposure. This 7th session of the Global Platform, under the theme, From Risk to Resilience, towards sustainable development for all in a COVID-19 transformed world, therefore takes on additional significance. Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, over the next 3 days, we have a unique opportunity to consider the best policy options to move from risk to resilience and to take important steps to ensure that the recovery from COVID-19 puts us back on track for a safe and sustainable future. The 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals provide us with a comprehensive framing, but we need to act with a sense of urgency, and we need to act at scale. First, we must turn the lessons learned from the pandemic, the largest global crisis in living memory, into action. We must secure better coherence and implementation of the humanitarian development nexus. That means improving risk governance because despite our efforts, risk creation is outpacing risk reduction. While many efforts are being made by governments around the world, we do not yet have the governance frameworks in place to manage the risks adequately, whether from a global pandemic or a tsunami, or to mitigate their impact. The 2022 Global Assessment Report that I recently launched in New York sets our ways in which governance systems can evolve to better address systemic risks. It makes clear that in a world of uncertainty, understanding and reducing risk is fundamental to achieving sustainable development. Second, we need to invest in stronger data capabilities to ensure that we leave no one behind. Through new multilateral instruments, including the UN's Complex Risk Analytics Fund, we want to support data ecosystems that can better anticipate, prevent, and respond to complex risk before they turn into full-blown disasters. This includes jointly developing risk analysis and investing in coordination and data infrastructure that enables knowledge sharing and joint anticipatory action. Such investments will help us to navigate complex risks earlier, faster, and in a more targeted and efficient manner. Third, we need to focus on the least developed countries and on small island developing states that suffer disproportionately when disasters strike. Disasters in these countries can wipe out decades of development progress and economic growth in a single event, with very serious long-term economic and social consequences. We urgently need to step up international cooperation for prevention and disaster risk reduction in the most vulnerable countries and for the most vulnerable communities, especially our women and our girls, our people with disabilities, the poor, the marginalized, and the isolated. One concrete example is the provision of early warning systems, a feasible and effective adaptation measure that provides more than a tenfold return on investment. Although just 24 hours warning of a storm can reduce the damage caused by 30%, less than half WMO member states have such systems in place today. The Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has asked the World Meteorological Organization to present an action plan at the next UN Climate Conference in Egypt in November, COP27. This will be aimed at ensuring that every person on Earth is covered by an early warning system within 5 years. Fourth, public and financial sectors must be risk-proofed. We need to think resilience, account for the real cost of disasters, and incentivize risk reduction to stop the spiral of disaster losses. We also need to factor disaster risk reduction into our financial frameworks. Alternative measurements beyond gross domestic product, GDP, should take account of disaster risk and resilience. The Multidimensional Vulnerability Index is one such metric. Your Excellency, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the world is looking to this forum for leadership, wisdom, experience, and expertise. The decisions you take today can play a significant part in preventing another calamity like the COVID-19 pandemic. We can and we must put our efforts firmly behind prevention and risk reduction and build a safe, sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for everyone. I thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I thank you, Ms. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and invite the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations to provide his opening remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. His Excellency Bapak Presiden Joko Widodo, President of the Republic of Indonesia, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy United Nations Secretary General, my dear sister Retno Marsudi, Foreign Minister of Indonesia, His Excellency Muhajir Effendi, Development and Culture Minister, USG Mami Mizutori, and Governor of Bali, His Excellency Mr. Wayan, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Government of Indonesia for hosting the global platform on disaster risk reduction, as well as commend both Indonesia and the UNDDR on this joint venture. This 7th global platform takes place in the midst of a global recovery from COVID-19 pandemic, a pandemic that has exposed how underlying vulnerabilities and inequalities have catastrophic consequences for the most exposed across the world. And whether it is the pandemic or landslides, prevention and risk reduction are essential to saving lives and to ensuring a sustainable development and future for all of us. I therefore welcome this year's theme, From Risk to Resilience, towards sustainable development for all in COVID-19 transformed world. Excellencies, we are all very excited to see Bali convening today's in-person event at this great scale. I have been informed that about 7,000 participants have registered for today's meeting. This is testament to the strong commitment and efforts made by the Indonesian government under the leadership of His Excellency Bapak Presiden Joko Widodo to fight COVID-19 and to put the country back on the recovery track. I would also like to thank all those from the host government, the Bali authorities, the United Nations teams, volunteers, interpreters, and the people of Bali and Indonesia for welcoming us all to this beautiful island. If there's one thing that we have learned with COVID-19, as well as from the ongoing climate crisis, it is that it is those who are the furthest behind who suffer the hardest, who wait the longest, who are deprived of development gains that are far too often wiped away by whatever crisis that comes our way. Our recovery from the pandemic must reflect this knowledge. Excellencies, resilience must be our mantra. Every new building, every new social program, every budget and every initiative must be designed and executed in the way that reduces risk. It must be embedded into everything we do, from the very beginning and cross-checked at each step of the way. And the importance, no, the necessity of this will only increase. Disasters and hazards associated with climate change are on the rise. Urbanization continues to present new challenges. The conflict in Ukraine is fueling the threat of famine, and social systems are strained under the pressures of a pandemic that continues more than 2 years after it began. We must work to address the vulnerabilities that exist, while at the same time preparing for those shocks that may yet emerge. This requires us to invest in a transformative recovery that amends gaps in economic policy, in social support, in environmental regulation, and in production and consumption. Everything about the way we live on this planet must now be seen through a precautionary lens, ever mindful of the vitality that exists, and laser-focused on covering gaps and strengthening defenses. Such a transformative recovery requires more than policy. It requires a whole of society ownership. The private sector must join us in this regard, and not only because it is the right thing to do, but because it is a smart thing to do. Investments, from whatever source they come from, must be risk-informed and resilient. As I stated last year at the climate event that I convened in September, the insurance sector is a vital and insufficiently tapped power, and a partner, especially given the sector is acutely aware of increasing risks. We must do more to engage this sector on a global level to achieve the levels of change we want, while reducing disaster risk reduction and systematic cascading risks. Mr. President, Excellencies, dear friends, this platform is a moment for governments, the United Nations system, and stakeholders to reflect on best practices in disaster risk governance and to recommit to enshrining disaster risk reduction across all areas of policy and practice, and to back this with necessary resources. On this point, I must commend our host government. Indonesia is highly vulnerable to natural hazards, yet has proactively invested in its disaster risk reduction efforts, emerging as a world leader in this regard. There is much to be learned from the Indonesian model. My dear friends, the COVID-19 crisis has shown that disaster risk reduction is everybody's business. I urge governments and stakeholders to promote a culture of risk reduction and resilience building at home. This includes nurturing young academics, scientists, and professionals working on disaster risk reduction. It includes adopting legislation and creating incentives for the private sector, both domestic and international, to ensure their business operations reduce them rather than create. It involves enforcing regulations for resilient infrastructure, resilient health and education systems, and it ensures the empowerment and mobilization of parliamentarians, local governments, community leaders, and women and local communities as advocates for disaster risk reduction. Ladies and gentlemen, 1 year from now, we will meet in New York for the midterm review of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Let us accelerate our efforts towards the achievement of the priorities of the Sendai Framework, understanding risk, planning for risk, and reducing risk. Let us join efforts to build back better. Together, ladies and gentlemen, we can make our world safer, more prosperous for everyone. I thank you. Terima kasih.
I thank Your Excellency, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, for your opening remarks. And now I invite His Excellency, Mr. Joko Widodo, President of the Republic of Indonesia, to provide his opening remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semuanya. Om Swastiastu. Yang saya hormati Presiden kelima Republik Indonesia, Ibu Megawati Soekarno Putri. Yang saya hormati Wakil Presiden Zambia, Her Excellency Mutale Nalumango. Yang saya hormati Deputi Sekretariat Jenderal of the UN, Her Excellency Amina J. Mohammed. Yang saya hormati Presiden of the General Assembly, Special Representative of the UN, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, para menteri, para gubernur, kepala BNPB, Bapak Ibu hadirin dan undangan yang berbahagia. Indonesia merupakan negara rawan bencana. Di tahun 2022 saja, per 23 Mei telah terjadi bencana sebanyak 1.613. Dan rata-rata dalam sebulan terjadi 500 kali gempa, skala kecil maupun besar. Gempa besar disertai tsunami terakhir Yang terbesar terjadi di Palu tahun 2018, sebanyak 2.113 orang meninggal. Dengan 139 gunung api aktif, letusan gunung berapi juga mengancam masyarakat Indonesia. Sepanjang 2015 hingga 2021 tercatat 121 letusan gunung berapi di Indonesia. Kebakaran hutan dan lahan juga merupakan ancaman. Kebakaran hutan dan lahan di tahun 1997-1998 merupakan yang terbesar yang pernah dialami Indonesia. Menghanguskan lebih dari 10 juta lahan, 10 juta hektar lahan yang tersebar di Indonesia. Dengan berbagai upaya, kebakaran hutan dan lahan bisa ditekan seminim mungkin, dan tahun 2021 Indonesia telah berhasil merestorasi lahan gambut seluas 3,4 juta hektar. Menjaga dan merevitalisasi hutan mangrove yang luasnya lebih dari 20% total area mangrove dunia sekitar 3,3 juta hektar. Dan Indonesia juga berhasil menurunkan kebakaran hutan dari 2,6 juta hektar hanya menjadi 358.000 hektar di tahun 2021. Yang mulia, para delegasi yang kami hormati, pandemi COVID-19 dalam 2 tahun ini merupakan bencana terbesar di dunia, menginfeksi 527 juta orang, merenggut korban 6,3 juta orang, di mana 7,5 juta anak kehilangan orang tua. Pemerintah Indonesia menerapkan kebijakan dinamis sesuai situasi terkini, menjalankan kebijakan gas dan rem untuk menjaga keseimbangan sisi kesehatan dan ekonomi, dan terbukti telah memberikan dampak yang baik. Indonesia yang terdiri dari 17.000 pulau dengan populasi 270 juta orang telah mensuntikkan 411 juta dosis vaksin. Kasus harian juga turun tajam dari 64.000 saat puncak menjadi 345 kasus harian per kemarin. Dan pertumbuhan ekonomi terjaga 5,01%, serta inflasi di level aman 3,5%. Daya tahan dan kesiapsiagaan terhadap bencana sangat menentukan angka kerugian yang harus ditanggung akibat bencana. Semakin tidak siap, semakin besar kerugiannya. Apalagi saat ini dunia sedang menghadapi climate change. Yang mulia para delegasi yang kami hormati, dengan tantangan kebencanaan yang berat dan bisa terjadi setiap saat, masyarakat dan pemerintah Indonesia harus siaga dan sigap menghadapi bencana, membangun sistem peringatan dini multi bencana, serta perwujudan masyarakat yang sadar dan tangguh akan bencana. Oleh karena itu, dalam Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction kali ini, pemerintah Indonesia menawarkan kepada dunia konsep resiliensi berkelanjutan sebagai solusi untuk menjawab tantangan risiko sistemik menghadapi semua bentuk bencana, termasuk menghadapi pandemi, dan sekaligus mendukung implementasi pembangunan berkelanjutan. Pertama, kita harus memperkuat budaya dan kelembagaan siaga bencana yang antisipatif, responsif, dan adaptif menghadapi bencana, pendidikan aman bencana, serta kelembagaan pemerintahan dan sosial yang sinergis dan tanggap terhadap bencana harus menjadi prioritas kita bersama. Yang kedua, setiap negara harus berinvestasi dalam sains, teknologi, dan inovasi, termasuk dalam menjamin akses pendanaan dan transfer teknologi. Akses pendanaan merupakan isu yang penting yang harus kita tangani secara serius. Indonesia menyusun strategi pendanaan dan asuransi bencana dengan membentuk dana bersama atau pooling fund, serta penggunaan dana pembangunan di tingkat desa melalui dana desa untuk mendukung upaya mitigasi dan kesiapsiagaan. Yang ketiga, membangun infrastruktur yang tangguh bencana dan tangguh terhadap perubahan iklim. Selain mitigasi infrastruktur fisik seperti dam, pemecah ombak, waduk dan tanggul, infrastruktur hijau seperti hutan mangrove, cemara udang di pantai dan vetiver untuk anti longsor, serta pembangunan ruang terbuka hijau harus menjadi bagian dari prioritas pembangunan infrastruktur. Perlindungan kepada masyarakat kelompok rentan yang bertempat tinggal di wilayah berisiko tinggi harus mendapatkan perhatian serius. Keempat, kita harus berkomitmen untuk mengimplementasikan kesepakatan global di tingkat nasional sampai tingkat lokal. Kerangka kerja Sendai, kesepakatan Paris, dan SDGs merupakan persetujuan internasional yang penting dalam upaya pengurangan risiko bencana dan perubahan iklim. Saya mengajak seluruh negara untuk berkomitmen dan bersungguh-sungguh untuk mengimplementasikannya. Yang mulia, para delegasi yang saya hormati, pengurangan risiko bencana adalah investasi efektif untuk mencegah kerugian di masa depan. Karena itu kami menegaskan komitmen Indonesia untuk melaksanakan kerangka kerja Sendai serta komitmen internasional lainnya. Indonesia juga siap berbagi pengalaman dan pengetahuan dalam mitigasi bencana. Sebagai negara rawan bencana, Indonesia mempunyai akumulasi pengetahuan dan pengalaman yang bisa menjadi pelajaran penting bagi dunia. Tapi Indonesia juga sangat ingin belajar dari pengalaman internasional. Let's work together to mitigate the risk of disaster for a better life, today and tomorrow. That's all from me in this special occasion by reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, the 7th session of Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2022 is officially open. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Please stay.
I thank Your Excellency, Mr. Joko Widodo, the President of the Republic of Indonesia, for his opening remarks. Now I'd like to ask our Master of Ceremony to guide us through the next part of our opening ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mizutori. We kindly request President Joko Widodo to remain on stage. We're inviting right now to join on stage United Nations Deputy Secretary General, President of United Nations General Assembly, Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, Indonesian Coordinating Minister of Human Development and Cultural Affairs, Indonesian Minister for Foreign Affairs, Indonesian Head of National Disaster Management Authority, United Nations Resident Coordinator for Indonesia. Kindly join on stage for the striking of the commemorative Kulkul bamboo instrument, a traditional bamboo instrument used by various communities in Balinese society. Like a bell, it is used to indicate the time of a gathering to call the people to action. Kulkul can be said as a symbol of organization in Balinese society, and despite the presence of telephone and radio, it is still the most effective means of communications today. So, ready, Excellencies? Allow me to count. Together now we will strike the Balinese Kulkul. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations for the official opening of the 7th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. Thank you, Your Excellencies. Congratulations to all delegates for the 7th session of the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. From risk to resilience, towards sustainable development for all in a COVID-19 transformed world. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the opening ceremony. Please rise as the President of the Republic of Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Joko Widodo, is leaving the venue. Let's give our warm applause. Thank you very much to the President of the Republic of Indonesia, to United Nations Deputy Secretary General, to President of United Nations General Assembly, to Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction, to Indonesian Coordinating Minister for Human Development and Cultural Affairs, Indonesian Minister for Foreign Affairs, Indonesian Head of National Disaster Management Authority, and the United Nations Resident Coordinator for Indonesia. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. We wish you a fruitful deliberation and meeting ahead. Terima kasih, thank you, and have a wonderful day.